Okay, we're back with another episode with another amazing parent. Megan's on the show with us today. How are you, Megan? Thanks for joining Lindsay and I.
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me.
Where in the world are you? Let's start with that.
I am in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Ooh, must be warmer than where we are in Canada today.
Been a little chilly lately, surprisingly, but I am looking forward to. I'm like, summer basically is probably just a few weeks away, so
Yeah,
I'm
no, we
hoping
love
for warmer temps.
it. We love it. How are you, Lindsay?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
Nice.
Been reading lots of Megan's content, and it's very, very interesting. I love the that you're a self-proclaimed digital nomad. So maybe could you just, for our listeners, give us a run through on what that is exactly and what is this lifestyle you're living? Absolutely. So, and I will, full disclosure, I have now settled down. This is our forever city. This is our forever home. But we were full-time travelers, or as you said, digital nomads for 4 full years. And that term, I think, existed back in 2018 when we started traveling. But it was new to me. I had never heard of it. And actually, my site is called Family Gap Year Guide. And so you might also have heard that term, family gap year, which is the
Mhm.
idea of a family basically taking a year off, usually to travel. And so that was also a term that I had never heard before. And that kind of gained a little more traction over the past several years as more people have, first of all, heard about other people doing things like this, traveling full time with their family. And then also, largely because of the pandemic, a lot of people started working remotely and then all of a sudden realized, wait, I can do this from anywhere. And so that's kind of how we started our journey, which, like I said, was back in 2018. And I have to say this, the homeschool piece of it kind of came second, because what we decided to do first was travel. We were living in Arizona at the time. That's where my husband grew up. That's where he's from. I'm from Maine, so complete opposite sides of the country. But we lived there for 13 years while we were having our kids. And in the fall of 2018, my husband was a school teacher, and we had 4 kids, and they were involved in activities. We did a lot of theater. We're both like music theater educators. And we just like our schedule was just absolutely jam packed. And what we realized after we had a month where like every single day was just every minute of the day scheduled out. We had to like stop and take a second, and we realized that these were things. It wasn't like we were overloaded with commitments that like we hated, that like things that we didn't want to do, like unpleasant things. They were all things that we had chosen to do. It's like how
Mm.
we were wanting to spend our time. It was things that we in theory really liked to do, but we had to stop and be like, we're miserable, we are so just overwhelmed, there's so much going on, we just want to stop. Let's just take a second and stop. And my husband was like, we need a year of no, like, let's do nothing, like nothing extra at all. And that kind of just evolved into let's literally like say no to everything. So I guess long story short, we sold our house. We sold a lot of our things. Whatever we wanted to keep, we put into a storage unit, 10 by 10 storage unit, and then basically put the kids in the van and we left.
Mm.
um, Obviously it wasn't like a spur of the moment decision because we had to sell the house and everything, but it all did happen pretty quickly. It was in one of those discussions where we were like, we're unhappy. We have to do something completely different. And what's that going to be? And so it was my husband that came up with the idea of like, well, we thought let's move back to the East Coast because I was from there. We really kind of wanted to be on the beach. We were in landlocked Arizona. We were just like, we don't really want to be here anymore. And so we thought, okay, let's move back to the East Coast. And so then it was his idea of, well, if we're going to sell our house anyway, and we're going to, go all the way across the country, we're gonna settle down over there. Why don't we take our time getting there? And so then he came up with the idea of, we'll sell our house and then we'll spend the next month in an Airbnb somewhere. And then after that, we'll spend another month in an Airbnb somewhere else. And I was just like, you're out of your mind. Like that's not a thing. People don't do that. Like that's way too out of the box. Like go have a seat, like rethink those thoughts. But then like that night I got on Airbnb and I was just kind of like looking around and I was like, not only is this completely possible, but it could save us money. Like when you think, yeah, when you think about like how much you're paying in a mortgage, and then on top of that, like all of the different things that come along with owning a house, like your utilities and your HOA, and in Arizona we had to have pest control and like just all kinds of things like that. It just adds up. And all of a sudden, when we didn't, have a house anymore, all those bills went away, and we're like, no, we can actually. This is very affordable. And that was 6 years ago. So, prices have increased, but prices on everything have increased. So if somebody was, looking to do it today, it might be the similar kind of trade-off. But pretty much that's just what we did. And like, I went from thinking that's way out there, nobody does that, to we did it. And the idea was we'll do, a school year basically of, we wanted to start in the Pacific Northwest because we had both never been there. And we wanted eventually to make our way over to the East Coast. So we're like, let's start by going to the area of the country we've never been to before. And then we'll kind of go down California, and then we'll go across the southern states. And I wanted to go to Maine for the summer. So we're like, we'll take the school year, take our time, month here, and we'll end in Maine. And then we'll, figure out where we want to settle down. We figured East Coast. We were thinking Virginia, the Carolinas area. Didn't want to be too cold up north, and wanted to be on the beach. And so that was the idea. And then 4 years later, we were like, now is a good time to settle down.
That's awesome. Man, I have so many questions, but just for context, just curious, how old were the kids when you guys are going through this process, and were they part of this discussion? And two, we've all said stuff in the heat of the moment, right? But along the way, was there any moment of like, what are we doing? Maybe we need to rethink what we're thinking.
Well, I think it was, as far as that last question, I think it was all kind of on the front end. And once we got out there and we started, and we were like, oh, this doesn't feel strange. I mean, yeah, you're in a new place every month. But first of all, the fact that we stayed for a whole month, it wasn't like every day we're, somewhere different. It was like, no, we kind of more or less put down roots for a certain amount of time, and we kind of settle in. And that was great for traveling because it's like everywhere we went, we got to really experience the location. We got to take all the time in the world because, like I said, we wanted to go to the Pacific Northwest. We had never been there before. And when I was trying to plan that kind of a vacation around his school schedule and our kids' schedule and all of our different activities, I realized, okay, if we want to go to Seattle, we want to go to Portland, we want to go to San Francisco, and we want to drive the Pacific Coast Highway down California. That's like at least 3 separate trips, just because of the time it would take to get there. Yeah. And then we'd want to spend, at least 2 days in each location. And like the cost of it all, it was just like, that's just never going to happen. And so once we were kind of free from the having a house and being set in one location, we could go everywhere. And it was just the coolest thing ever. So I think once we just kind of got out on the road and we started doing it, like I said, it took us 4 years to then stop what we were doing. So I think once we got out there, we're like, no, this works and it's fantastic. There were definitely it was tough to make the leap, but once we made the leap, it was like, no, this is great. And related to that, I'll talk about the kids for a second. So you asked how old they were. So when we started, our oldest was 10. So we have 4. We have boy, girl, boy, girl. So we had a 10-year-old boy, 7-year-old girl, another son who was 5. And then my youngest, our younger daughter, turned 2 the day after we left.
Oh my God.
2 to 10. Yes. And then when we stopped traveling, the oldest was, they're all 4 years older. So 14 to 6. And now it's been a year since then. So my oldest is now 15 and driving. And anyway, the 2 younger ones are like now the same age as the 2 older ones were when we started traveling. And that's what I was going to say about like the tough part was taking the leap, because our 2 older kids were in school. They had some years of charter school in Arizona, and my younger son was about to go into kindergarten. And I had like this, because we had never really planned on homeschooling. It was more, like I said, a result of wanting to travel. And once we did, we realized all the benefits of it, which are, many. But I just kind of like had a hard time removing my like preconceived notions and like just thinking, like, I went to public school. My husband went to public school. He taught public school. Our kids will go, to a charter school. It's pretty similar to public school. And our second son was about to go into kindergarten. And we decided, we like made the final decision to travel right before school started. So it was actually the night of his Meet the Teacher night. He was all set up to go to kindergarten. He, had a teacher. And on Meet the Teacher night, that's when we were like, okay, I'm not going to take him because we pretty much have decided we're going to do this. I'm not going to go take him to a classroom that he doesn't end up going to and meet this teacher. But that night I cried and cried because all I could think is there's this little desk somewhere that's got his name on it and a chair, and he's got a cubby somewhere that says Harrison. And it was tough to like separate, like, we're going to do something different. And I always just thought like, well, at the time I thought, what's he going to miss out on? Like, you go to kindergarten, it's a whole experience. He's going to go to music class and he's going to have a little kindergarten graduation. And then a year later, I looked back on like all of the things he did that year. And I'm just like, what would he have missed out on if I hadn't done this? Like just the amazing opportunity to go to like almost every state in the US and just like outside the box things. Like when we were in South Padre Island, Texas, we did a sandcastle building lesson. I'm like, he wouldn't have gotten to do that in regular school. That's like something that's so neat. And at the end of the year, that year, we got on Amazon and we ordered him a little cap and gown and we did a little like ceremony. So he didn't really miss out on anything. And that's when I kind of really realized like, no, this is, the trade-offs are like what you're trading off are very small in comparison to what you're getting out of the experience, for sure.
I think it's a bit of a fear of breaking out of that like mainstream, right? Like you just don't know what's on the other side until you get there. So how did you find homeschooling when you hadn't homeschooled before and now you've completely changed your whole lifestyle and you also have to teach your kids at the same time?
Yeah. So, homeschooling had never been on our radar. And then when we were like, well, I think we want to travel full time, at least for a year, we're like, well, I guess that means we're homeschoolers now. That's the reality of our situation. My husband and I were both educators, but, like performing arts educators. So on one hand, I feel like we felt more or less confident that we could teach our kids. And on the other hand, our two kids that were in school already, one had gone up to fourth grade. He had finished fourth grade. Then we started traveling. The other did kindergarten and first. And in first and first grade on, they were in accelerated classrooms, which in theory were working a year ahead. And in our original plan, we were just going to do one school year. And so we came at it from the mentality of they're basically working a year ahead. So if we do a year and we teach them nothing, like they don't progress at all, they're not fucking up. Like they just not even. But like that was so silly because we didn't realize like when it's a 1-on-1 situation or 2-on-4 situation, they can learn so much faster. And you kind of get rid of all the excess stuff that they don't need. And the fact that they're, otherwise would be in a classroom of 20 to 30 kids that the teacher needs to divide their time among, like they can move so much faster. And that's something that we did. Like my daughter who was going into second grade, that next school year, we didn't say like, okay, here's what you need to learn in second grade. You'll learn that. And that's it. Like, no, she started in second grade math. And as soon as she got through that, she moved on to third grade math. Like we just kept moving forward. And so last fall, so we stopped traveling in July of 2022. And we did actually put the kids back in school. So they're now in their second year of public school since we stopped traveling. And they were so far ahead, like just like head and shoulders above their peers. In fact, my second daughter, who actually didn't really miss out on school because she was going into kindergarten. We wanted her to go into first, but like age-wise, they made her start kindergarten. And halfway through the year, they bumped her up to first because they were like, this is silly. This needs to be at least in first grade. So they actually did move her up, and that was good.
That is incredible, man. I feel like some of the stuff we talk about with parents, Lindsay, most of the parents who join us who are first-time homeschoolers, the first thing they ask us is, well, how do I teach for 4 hours a day? And we're like, you don't have to teach for 4 hours a day. And then it's like, what do I do for the rest of the day? And then the panic kicks in because now you got to, and just for context, Lindsay homeschools. My kids are still in public school. Like my wife and I don't love them enough to have them around all the time yet. But I tell them. But I remember just, when your son looks at you and he's just like, I'm bored. I hate those words. I'm like, I don't know what to do because I grew up at a time where we had something called daydreaming and imagination.
Mm.
Go find yours. So as you are trying to fill up the days, it's great that you're exposing them to the environment. Then there's a bit of education. What else did you have to figure out in that puzzle?
Yeah, I would love to speak to all of that because those were all, things that we came up against. So let's see. First of all, you said like, how do we teach for 4 hours a day? So one thing that we did, and we kind of like did it wrong first and then realized like, okay, not only like, how do I entertain this child all day, but I've got 4 kids all at different levels. How does one person, teach everybody at once and everybody's coming to me at the same time with like, I don't know what to do here. What do I do next? And so one thing that we did is we just tried to get them as independent as possible. So we used a Google Sheet and each kid had their own tab, not so much the youngest. She was 2 at the time, but we kind of added her in the last year or so of traveling and gave her some tasks to do. But primarily for the 3 older kids who were in school, of school age, they each had a tab. And on the first column on the sheet, we would have a list of like everything that they were supposed to do that day. So I think like routines are huge. And we've always been really big on that. Even before they start school for the day, the expectation is like you get up, you do your morning routine. What is that? You shower, you brush your teeth, you get dressed, you brush your teeth. And once you're done with all those things, you start on school. And something that I realized early on is when you're in public school and you're dealing with other teachers, other students, other people's schedules, you have to have more of a time-based plan where you're like from 9 to 10 is math, from 10 to 11 is reading or whatever it is. And we were like, that doesn't really work so much. So we kind of did ours on a task base. So like number 1, every single day, their first school task was to write in a journal. Mm-hmm. And that was great because first of all, they're writing every day. And 4 years later, they had this like incredible record of all the places that they had gone to, all the things that they had done without us having to be like, you should really do that. Like, that would be a great idea. No, it was just done deal. Every day they wrote in a journal about what they had done the previous day. Based on how old they were, that was like how many words they had to write. So, the older kids had to write a little bit more and add a little more detail into what they did. And then usually the next thing would be like read 2 chapters of a book. And what they would do is next to that column of all their tasks, each column after that would be a day. And so next to the journal, they would write how many words they wrote. And next to reading, they'd say, I read chapters 1 and 2 of whatever book they were reading. And then usually it was followed with math. And they would use, an online program to do whatever level of math they were working on. And they knew that they had to do the exercises and the videos, whatever was part of the learning until they got to a quiz or a test. And then they took the quiz or the test and they put their grade in there. And then, whatever else was on that list, they would just go down. But we always started with those 3 because we were like, if they write and they read and they do math every day, that's enough. Yeah. Like more is better, and like a variety of things, that's great, but that's the most important. So if you do those 3 things and then we decide we're in Washington, D.C., we're going to go tour the Capitol building, or like whatever it is that we want to do, if we can get out and like do something in the new place that we're visiting, that's super valuable. And that's like a successful day of learning. But if it was a day where we're mostly going to be at home, then they would have, additional things on the list. So some different examples are when my daughter was in 3rd grade, we found like a 3rd grade science textbook online, just like a PDF. And it would be read the unit and answer the questions at the end. And she would mark off having done that. And then we would try to include some things that are a little more outside the box. Like for a while, every day they were supposed to play a game of chess. And it could be against a sibling or it could be online against the computer. They did like typing lessons, which is really important these daes. Of course, they also did handwriting, which is still important these days.
Really important. Yeah.
So it was just like cool to put different things in there that maybe they wouldn't get at school. And we did a lot of like life skills type stuff too, not necessarily as part of the school day, but like, at the end of the school day, we're going to make dinner, and that everybody's going to eat dinner. So everybody should be involved, somehow, like even the littlest ones, they can put plates on the table. And I think ultimately it was a really great way to like prepare these kids for the world. You know, my oldest now, he's planning on graduating a year early, so that would be next year.
Wow.
Which is, yeah, big deal. And he's young too, so that would be him graduating before he turns 17. So
Wow, what a
goes. It might result in a gap year, like a regular gap year, where maybe he'll work before college. But anyway, he feels great about like going out in the world. He's like, Mom, I can cook all these meals. It's like I need a rice cooker and, you know, all these things, and he can do laundry. And like, I just think that's really important to include, in addition to reading, math, and all those things. But then like just having that list of tasks meant that every few months or so, we'd just refresh it, and we'd take something out, add something in. Sometimes we would have like them doing something related to music every day. And at other times we had like a special schedule where Monday they would do something, Tuesday they would do something. And it could be fun too. Like, sometimes Science was watching an episode of Mythbusters, you know, and so they love that, but they're learning a lot from it. We had Shark Tank on the list at various times. And so, yeah, they're really independent. They know what's expected of them. There's less on our plate, but we can always check in. We know exactly what they're doing. So yeah, I think that was a really great system. It worked for us.
I love that. And I love that you said that, like, routine versus a time constraint schedule. Because I think that's what a lot of new homeschoolers find, is that, you know, you're done math when you're done math, whether that's 20 minutes or an hour and a half, rather than like a 9 to 10 sort of time. So,
and a lot of the words you're using too. I mean, you know, we got into this. So many parents that want to go to homeschooling. I love your input on like, why do you think there's a rise? I mean, COVID obviously started it, but it continued to grow, and words that parents use to describe their kids after some homeschooling, whether it's the entire time or even for a couple of years like you, they're more independent, they're more confident, they're more worldly, and they're more ambitious into what they want to do. Historically, you don't use those kind of words when we talk about homeschooling. So, you know, and both of you have homeschooled, and love for both of you to jump in. But this stereotypical version that we've all sort of heard in the background is sort of what, you know, I think still dominates the narrative sometimes in the media. And then we get stories like you guys where no, they're different words to describe, you know, the same ecosystem. But maybe starting with you, Megan, you know, why do you think the rise is happening, and this you know, impact we're seeing with the words that you're using?
Yeah, well, I think like you said, when we talked about me taking that leap and how like that was hard to do, but then once we did it, we were like, oh, this is amazing. I think that a lot of people realized that with the pandemic. They were like, we didn't choose to have kids at home. And I know there was a lot of like e-learning situations that were not great. And I think a lot of parents were like, I'm just going to homeschool. Like, instead of sending my kid to school. I had a friend from work who, like, every day it seemed like she was either one of her kids was staying home because somebody else in the class was sick, and like she never knew from day to day what was going to happen. And so she was just like, I'll just homeschool, because at least then I can plan and I know what's going on. So I think that a lot of people kind of got stuck in that situation. Like, they didn't choose it, but it was chosen for them. And they're like, oh, wait, this is actually kind of nice, or this works for my family. Same with working remotely. A lot of companies were like, oh, this actually could work. And so I think, yeah, more and more people are doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the remote work thing is a huge factor, because a lot of people who maybe wanted to homeschool now have the opportunity, and that lends to the traveling as well if they want to travel and homeschool. So that definitely contributes to the rise. And you said it perfectly, Megan. Like, people were maybe didn't think they wanted to homeschool, but they were forced to try during COVID, and they just start seeing all of the benefits. And you mentioned earlier how you and your husband felt so overwhelmed with just things, all the things you have to do, right? A school day is long, and then you have all the extracurriculars and dinner and bath and bed and everything. And I think a lot of parents are feeling that sort of pressure these days, where it's like, these are all things we want to do, but we're also so busy that we're miserable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as a public school parent, my frustration is most of the hours are given to the school system. So when we want to pack in all these things that we want them to experience in life, we're squeezing out like that 5 to 8, and that's it. And then they got to shower and go to bed, and the next day starts. So I'm like, the bulk of the hours that we could be influential, they're parked in a seat somewhere. But there's also a ton of us that are public schools parents where the fear of change and the fear of unknown is greater than the risk of something new, which you has leapfrogged. But I'm sure there's a listener who's going to be like, all right, Megan, all the rosy stuff is nice, but what are like those bad days like? That's got to equally be there, because I believe you, but I don't believe you. What are some of like the days where you're like, oh shit, man, turn this van around. We can to our house days like.
Man, I wish I had like a great example of that. I feel like I don't. I mean, of course, like everyone's gonna have rough days, and I think maybe the part that could be difficult is just we were always together. There's 6 of us. And actually, some people have, when they find out what I did, some people were like, oh, I could never live in an RV full time with 6 people. I'm like, well, I probably couldn't either. And that's not what we did. But like, yeah, we worked from home, we schooled from home. Any activities we did, we're all together. Like, especially when we went overseas, we had spent 3 years in a minivan around the U.S., kind of like our like safety blanket. And then we spent 10 months traveling through Europe, where everybody had one backpack and everything was public transportation. And so we're just together nonstop. So I think like the biggest frustrations were, first of all, like maybe trying to work while the kids are home all day. You don't have that frustration if the kids are leaving to go to school. And then just the kids being around each other all day, every day, and just, bickering a little bit. But again, I don't have like the day that everything went wrong. But the other thing that is a challenge for us, especially because of the traveling aspect, is so much of their schooling was on a screen. And so it's like they would spend a lot of their schooling time on a screen. And then at the end of the day, when they're done with school, well, what do they want to do? They want to watch YouTube. They want to play Minecraft, and that's still on a screen. And so we did try to work in as much as possible, like go outside, go do some exercises, or we did, especially when we were in the States and we had our minivan, we had workbooks. So like there was some time not on a screen, and that was good to kind of give them a break. And the other thing that we did is we just homeschooled right through the summers, because we were like, if we don't kind of structure their day a little bit in the summer, they're just going to be on the screen all day. Where they're going to be bothering us all day. Like they still need, we would usually do kind of like a more fun version of the school tracker. So, we'd still start with still a journal, still reading, still math. And then maybe we'd work in some more fun activities there, like play a game or, whatever it is. But yeah, all the way through the summer, we didn't stop.
Man, I just remember as we were talking, I'm just remembering last day of summer or winter before the winter holidays start, and we had this whole like travel to New York for Christmas and Niagara with the family, and my son is like, Daddy, today's the last day of school. I'm like, yeah, are you excited? Because I don't have to stop at the iPad at 9 o'clock anymore. I'm like, what? That's what you're excited about for the next 2 weeks, that you could be on the iPad unlimited because it's a holiday? Like, no, we get your little butt out of the house. But no, screens are weird. They're a necessity at some point. I mean, our business is based on screens, but we also are like, well, screens can't be the only way. And the fact that you've got this blended approach of, offline, online, and then the world is really, commendable.
Yeah. So I know we got a lot of homeschoolers who look at world schooling and definitely think, I myself have been like, that looks amazing. What would be some tips you had for anyone who was sort of thinking about taking the plunge?
Let's see. So I like to use the term road schooling. I don't know that anybody has like officially defined what's what. But what I think about it, the way I define road schooling is, essentially it's homeschooling on the road. And it's definitely a combination of traditional sit down and learn, and then also like all that experiential learning, getting out and experiencing different cultures. And like, in France, where we got our older kids to go to the boulangerie and order bread and pay, order in French and like pay. And we'd be like, what's from outside? And like, they did it. They spoke French. Cool things like that they're learning from. Whereas some people might think, as like world schooling, or maybe even using the term road schooling as more just like no traditional learning, like just, going out into the world and seeing what they do. And I mean, hey, that's something to try too. Our version of it was more like the combination of the two things, which I think works really well. So I guess some tips would be, as far as like just getting on the road to begin with, traveling, I think that idea that like, if you were to give up your home base and sell a home or rent it, if that's something you wanted to do, that you can kind of trade those expenses for expenses on the road, more or less, that tends to kind of even out. So like, if you've ever thought, oh, I could never do that, like I just couldn't afford something like that, it's possible. Especially, we worked the whole time we were out. And so I've heard of some people like saving and saving and saving and then going. And of course, that's hard because you have to spend the time to save the money. And then when the money runs out, you're done traveling. Whereas if you can work on the road, then you can kind of do it indefinitely. So that's probably my number one tip for, if they're interested in full-time travel. And then as far as homeschooling, I think like, try to make it as easy on yourself as possible. Like it doesn't have to be a stressful thing. Like I said, make that tracker and get the kids as independent as possible. And then also, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Like maybe this is a good moment to pitch Schoolio, because I know like that it seems like you've got an awesome plan for for the whole family. It doesn't have to be buying like a whole curriculum and all of these different supplies. Like there's so much online. There's so much for free. There's so much that's inexpensive that it doesn't have to be stressful, and it doesn't have to be, breaking the bank.
No, I love that. And thank you for the little Schoolio plug. And that's really our vision too, because if education becomes a line item you have to worry about on top of living a nomadic lifestyle and worrying about the kids, and then you're going to minimize the adventure, versus if we're like, listen, you need education. What's the easiest way to just get that into your ecosystem? And then we're just there as an on and off button. But layer on top of that, everywhere you go, what you want your kids to learn and experience. And so we'll see how this little rocket, continues to grow. But as we sign off with a few minutes left, where can people find you? I know you started a blog. That's how we met. Is that an active blog? Are you looking to mentor, support, get to know other people?
Yeah. So the blog is familygapyearguide.com. And that's where I write all about our travel adventures. I'm still trying to like get at least a post out about every place that we've visited. So I've got some catching up to do because, 4 years of traveling. But I also write about how to do this, how to take a family gap year. And I have some courses. I have like the big flagship course, Family Gap Year Academy, which is like absolutely everything from like learning how to handle finances to take a big trip like that, all the way through, where to stay, where to go, how to plan your different destinations and what to see in different places, and all the way through road schooling, like a whole unit on road schooling and our whole system, and like the tracker I mentioned, we include that, and all kinds of videos and resources. And then I also have like the road schooling unit by itself. So it's called Rock and Road School. It's just that unit, if that's something you're interested in. And I think even for people that aren't planning on, taking life on the road like we did, it's a great little course that includes everything about just how we homeschool in general. It would apply even if you're not going anywhere. And it just has that like bonus information that if you did want to incorporate more travel into your homeschool life, then, there's some good tips in there on how to do that. So familygapyearguide.com will lead you to basically everything that I mentioned.
That is incredible. That is incredible. Last words from you, my friend Lindsay.
I think this was great. Thank you for sharing and telling us all about your adventures. It's, I'm sure, inspiring lots of people out there to want to get started with traveling.
Yeah, and my wife is in the other room listening. I've been telling her we got to pack our stuff up, sell the house, and move. So maybe after this call, she's got some words for me, Megan, of inspiration. Thank you so much for that. And for everybody listening, look out in the comments below. We'll leave links and all sorts of information to get in touch with Megan. And of course, we're eternally grateful for jumping on and sharing your comment and conversation with us today.
Of course. Thanks so much. It was fun to chat with you.